Life is full of work and stress. Parenting can be a mess. Being a woman is hard enough without adding on that extra stuff. We'll cover topics of every kind. Helpful resources we will find. We'll even drink a bottle of wine. Join us. It will be a real good time. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Nikki.
And welcome to Working Mom's Whine, where we drink a bottle of wine
and whine about life and hopefully try to find ways that improve your life and ours.
Mm-hmm. And we definitely didn't just record that intro 3 different times because I screwed it up every time.
Nope, not at
all. Today's wine is another cab. I guess we have a trend going. This is the Color Block wine. Let's see if it's going to cooperate. No, it's not. I think it's my window. You know what I mean?
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
That helps. So I just happened to see this one while I was at the grocery store. This is a 2022 from, is it Valle Central, since it's chilly? It says, late in the fall, vineyards put on a vivid display of color, creating a patchwork of gold, crimson, and burgundy. Color Block wines are inspired by that explosion of color. So the cab has ripe blackberries and black pepper, and they recommend using it with short ribs, skirt steak, or anything with bacon. I feel like anything goes with bacon, though.
You might be right. I don't know. I think a white wine with bacon would be gross.
You might be right. All right. So today we've decided to whine about maternity leave or the lack thereof. Paid time off, not really getting to be used for time off, and not even really getting to take our lunch breaks to just sit down and quietly have some lunch.
Mm-hmm. As I'm sure any working parent out there who is listening to this understands, many of your vacation days, PTO breaks, lunch breaks, any and all of the above are utilized to do things for your children.
Yes. Side note, I just noticed the shirt you're wearing, and I love it.
I'm telling you, if you're listening to us on Spotify, you need to go over to YouTube and watch us because you're missing half the show. So, if anybody does not know who this is,
we're disappointed.
I don't know.
We're not even mad. We're just disappointed.
We're disappointed. Go watch The Emperor's New Groove.
That's
you won't regret it.
That's probably still one of my favorite movies. But
it's a good one.
So let's start with PTO and lunch breaks.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to maternity leave.
Yeah.
So with you, I feel like your situation's even worse because you are generally handling everything by yourself.
Yes.
And also you're having to juggle it with having to work from home during very specific hours.
Yes. So I am work at home and I am salaried, but I still have a specific shift I have to clock in and clock out for that our team operates on. And I also have a daughter who it's her first year of school, and I'm a single parent. And there have been lots of issues with buses the last year or two, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. Short staffing, all the other things that usually come with riding on a bus that can be a pain, like having to get up earlier and stay later, get home later and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to avoid all of that because I felt like adjusting from Ari was watched at home by her grandma. And so she didn't even go to daycare, preschool, nothing. I thought the adjustment to kindergarten was going to be big enough. I didn't want to throw a school bus thing in there. And I don't have the most positive feelings about stuff that happens on a school bus.
That is very fair from a lot of the things that my children have heard and seen and experienced on the school bus.
Yes, and I understand a lot of parents don't have the choice, but we also have the added complication of a very weird shared custody schedule. And I did not want to have to do one day bus, one day pickup, and every other week it changes one day of the week if she's getting on the bus or not. It's too confusing. It's too much for a 6-year-old to keep track of when do I get on the bus and when do I not. And I know there are teachers there to help, but they also have 20 other kids in the class. So I'm not trying to make it more stressful, right? For everyone else but myself.
More stress for
of
teachers.
Course. So what do? I talked to my boss, who very graciously agreed to let me use the first half of my lunch break in the morning to take her to school and the second half to leave early to pick her up from school, which is great. I get to drive her, which is what I wanted to do. I get to remove that extra transition, and we can look at doing that next year. And my co-parent did not want to do the bus thing because it would complicate things for him when he needed to pick her up for his 1 to 2 evenings a week, depending on what week it is. And he drives pretty far to come out and pick her up at her school already. So, why make that more complicated than it has to be? We do share that drive. He picks her up and then I go get her from his house. So we split the drive every time, but it is a good 40-minute drive. So I digress. I did not want to do the school bus. And so my lunch every single day, the entire thing is taken by me being the school bus for Ari. So I don't have lunch breaks ever.
That's one thing that kept me at home for a couple of years, because when I used to work for a smaller company and eventually the layoffs got to me. And so I worked from home for a little bit while I was searching for something else. But, and this is something else we can cover, between the insane daycare costs and also trying to figure out how we would get kids on and off the bus or to and from school, you cannot work a normal shift and do that. So it's like you have no choice but to sacrifice your lunch break in those situations. I'm lucky enough to work a job now where we are afternoons, evenings, and weekends primarily. And even though I've been here long enough that I can go in the mornings when I feel like it, I don't have to. And most people in my line of work don't, because they don't have the same tenure. And so it's very easy for me to get up, get the kids on the bus, shower after they're gone, and then get ready for work and go. Plus I have Brandon, so.
Yes.
But I don't have to use my lunch break for things. But what I do end up using quite often is PTO for doctor appointments, dentist appointments, kids' sick days. And that works great when you're trying to split it until one of you gets sick, especially if one of you gets sick for over a month. I'm not going to name any names here, but it was not me this time. But when one person's PTO gets all ate up and you have to wait for it to renew, the other person starts using up all of their PTO trying to deal with kid stuff.
It just becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So it's very, very little of my PTO actually goes towards enjoying time off. A lot of it goes towards the above mentioned things, or like maybe because we had to juggle schedules a certain way, I end up having to use a few hours of PTO at the end of a week consistently over a month or two. And then before I know it, all my PTO is gone.
I will say I'm much more fortunate on the PTO front because I have clawed my way into staying at this company for 9 years, despite them trying to ditch me 3 times. I have hit the highest level of PTO accrual. I get a good amount each year, and I can carry 40 hours over each year, and I set it up so that I do every single year, just because you never know when you're going to have that medical issue, that thing come up when you're going to need it. So I always keep that extra 40 hours in. And we are allowed to actually do, I forget if it's once a month or twice a month, we can take what's called time away from work, where we're allowed to leave. It has to be pre-approved by your manager, but you're allowed to leave for 2 hours at a time for medical appointments. So if I have a medical appointment, I request it ahead. I make sure that nobody cares and that other people are going to be there, and I can leave, go to the appointment, and come back. And it's not a big issue. It's not hard to schedule that, and people are pretty cool with that. It doesn't really hurt anybody because you're there for the rest of the day, so they don't have to like cover you or anything. But it allows you to leave and come back and take care of some of those things. But it has been difficult trying to juggle using time for Ari's appointments. So I only get time away from work once a month. And I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I can only use it for me. So when I need time for her, I have to use PTO. I should probably ask that question because I might be losing PTO that I don't have to lose. But I just assumed it was like for you and not everybody in your family,
I had that going on in a slightly different way. So being in management, there are often times where people will text or call or communicate with me off the clock. And of course, I'm going through this time in my life where I'm here and there using an hour or two of PTO just to make the 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into a meeting one time, and the boss above us was like, so you guys can like claim an administrative hour every week too. And we're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, do you answer questions off the clock? Do you respond to emails? We're like, yeah. He goes, yeah, you can save that PTO, claim your administrative hour. So I have been.
Heck yeah. You do nothing but answer that phone all the time
I know.
I'm with you. So
you guys have probably seen me do it during the podcast. So
I'd say you could probably claim like 10 hours a week of administrative time.
I did think I could probably claim closer to 2, but then I never like actually clock it to figure it out. So right now I'm just sticking with 1 because it seems to do the trick. So
and you know us from the Enneagram episodes. We are rule followers. We are not going to push that boundary.
I was making, now we're really going to go on a tangent. I was making calls the other day, and we have to mark things as whether or not we were able to contact the person, if we left a voicemail, if it's a bad phone number. And they recently changed the rules on when it is technically, I did not contact this person.
Okay.
And they changed it in a way to make us be less annoying to the people we are calling, which I greatly appreciate because I don't want to talk to someone who's annoyed with me before.
Wish my company would do that.
I know. But along those lines, there was something I pulled the other night, and I marked it one way, and I was like, was that right? Was that according to the old rules or the new rules? And I was like really freaked out because I'm such a rule follower.
We don't want to upset the apple cart.
Exactly. But back on the PTO.
Yeah. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. And you want to have good work-life balance, but you also don't want to be the person who takes advantage of the system and is the no person at work and the the person that just takes advantage and runs with it and puts everybody else at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
hard.
And we get decently generous PTO. Like the first year is a little rough in my opinion, but then the next year they give you another week on top of what you initially get. So that's
good. I think it takes 3 years at my company to get another boost, and then the 5-year mark is
so 5 years will be my next boost. The guy that was my boss before I became a team lead too.
Yeah.
He hit 5 years a few months ago, and he was talking about the extra PTO that he gets, and I'm like, oh man, only like a year and a half to go.
Oh boy, how much longer I got? My fake watch I'm not wearing.
Exactly. So at the 5-year mark, I think it will be better too, and I think it doesn't help that I have 4 children.
Yeah.
And granted,
see, in the grand scheme of things, you have a partner to help you, but you also have 3 more children than me.
That's true.
So
I'll tell you though, I was so happy with something he did the other day. I've been taking Eliana to all her orthodontist appointments, not because I don't ask, I just do it because I schedule it for when I'm home and then I do it. And there was one day where I needed him to take her, and so I said, "Can you take her?" And I gave him the rundown on like where to go, and we were on a payment plan for the braces, so how to make a payment on his way out and what card to use and whatever else. So he does that, and then he messages me the date and time of her next appointment and says, I made it for a time when I can take her.
Aww.
I know. I was like,
Good job, Brandon.
That is how you sweep me off my feet right there. That and doing the dishes, like.
Right.
So I do really appreciate that he stepped up and took over that appointment. And then anytime that like I ask him to take them to one, he will. But
yeah,
it is a balancing act.
For sure.
Luckily, they're all getting old enough now, though, that like we're not doing like the baby and toddler appointments anymore. And so they're going like once a year unless we have like an issue. But
That's always helpful.
Yeah.
Those appointments initially for the first 3 years?
Yeah, something like that.
There's so many.
Yeah. It's
And
at
for a
least the
while,
first 2.
When Ari was little, when her dad and I split, she had a pediatrician out by, where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved 40 minutes west.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was driving her 40 minutes each direction to go to all these stinking appointments. And anytime anything came up, because I just didn't take the time and the moments and the research and all of that it takes to find a new doctor out by us. And I didn't actually do that until after COVID. So there were several years that I drove that route. I just didn't want to mess with it during such a weird time of the world. Who wants to change their doctor during COVID?
Well, I think they were really backed up then too. So chances are they would have said, we can, but we'll see you in 8 months.
Yeah, that's very true. Even the one I have now that I did get near us, anytime I call when she's sick and needs to go in, she can't. I've had to take her to urgent care each time because they can't get me in. They're too busy.
Yeah.
And I get it, but it sucks.
Yeah.
Can we get some more pediatricians out in the world?
We'll treat you well. We promise.
We'll be good little doobies. Well, and we did a weird vaccine schedule. We got all the vaccines,
you had like a delayed
we did
one.
A weird schedule. Yeah. So I didn't want to mess with that until it was all caught up and all ready to go, because that confuses some people and makes some doctors mad. So
yeah. And when you're transitioning, if there's any issues getting the shot records sent over, things like that can also like really mess things up.
Yes.
I have had that issue myself.
I pretty much waited until she had to get a check-in to go to kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, now I'm ready.
This is the time. Let's do it all at once.
This is the time.
I haven't thought about that in a long time. Anything else on PTO?
Oh, gosh.
We want more vacations.
I'd say I'm also bad at using my PTO throughout the year. Like, I hoard it in fear that I'll need it, and then I'll get to, like, October and be like, oh, crap, I need to use a bunch of it before I lose it.
I 100% do not have that problem.
And then I, have to take a bunch of weird random days that aren't really for anything fun, and it's cold, and, like, there was one year that I did really well, and I took almost every Friday in the summer. I kind of spaced it. I think maybe it was every other Friday or something.
That would be fun.
I live in a lake community, so I would just take Ari to the beach, and it was nice. It was good. But now to take time off, I unfortunately have to get the permission of 5 people. No, it's more now because we got 2
I was going to say,
people.
you probably need both hands.
7 people, I think. They all have to agree that, yes, they're on board. No, they're not leaving on that same day. And yes, they'll cover for me for various accounts. So it's complicated to take a day off. I almost hesitate doing it because I just hate having to ask that many people and coordinate all of that. So that's a pain, but that's like one of those first world problems. Like, oh, poor you have to ask 7 people. At least you have time, So I just, this is my chance to whine. So
that's right. That's
deal.
Right. We are working moms who are whining.
And as a therapist, I tell people all the time, you cannot play the comparison game with anything. Level of trauma, level of abuse, level of privilege, level of any of those things.
Level of PTO.
Yes. None of those things can compute to you not deserving to feel how you feel, or be stressed by what you're stressed by, or be upset about what you're upset about. Everybody's feelings are valid.
That's right. I do have an advantage there where I work. It's not a big deal to just be like, oh, I'm going to suddenly decide to take 3 days of PTO. Assuming I'm not in the middle of a conversation with somebody. Like if I just leave a file hanging, yes, we're going to have a problem.
You're in trouble.
But in my position, especially, we're not keeping those things. We're sending them to the loan officers.
Yeah.
So once we have our one and done conversation, it's generally out of our wheelhouse. And as long as we are good about like setting our out of office message on the email to direct them to like someone else who can help them during that time.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. I do try to give my superiors a little notice when I'm taking like a week, but
well, yeah.
That's
a big one.
Right. But if it's like a day here and there, Same thing with people on my team. They'll just take their PTO when they feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't generally reach out to me and try to get my permission first. And then I always tell them, as long as it's not, if it's 2 days or more, at least set your out of office message.
Yeah.
Maybe drop me a line. But other than that, whatever.
Good to go.
Yeah.
And I will say my team members are great about every time I ask being like, yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'll cover you. Sure.
Nice.
You know, it's hardly ever an issue. I make it a thing with myself, I guess.
Well, and to
I don't
be
want to
fair,
inconvenience anybody, heaven forbid.
if they were all on board with it and a boss was not, like say you had a difficult boss at any point,
Yeah,
that could potentially ruin the whole thing.
it could.
But
It could. I'm pretty fortunate
knock
in
on
that
particle
department.
board.
My manager is great, and my new team lead was the manager over me when I was a team lead before. So we know each other very well. We work very well together, and I have no trouble talking to her about things in a very real and very bluntly honest way. Like, she knows how I feel. She went through the same layoff last time that I did, and we went through it together. And so what's really nice is I don't really even have to, like, sometimes when you're talking to other people in the company, you don't want to jade them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to really tell people how you feel about the company that has tried to ditch you 3 times in the most just despicable kind of ways. You know, I have a lot of feelings about that, and it is very backed up with experience and evidence. But there are the right people and the wrong people to be honest about those feelings with, of course. And usually your management is not someone you are super honest about that
Right,
with.
right.
However, I'm very fortunate in my case that, you know, my team lead, she already knows. She went through it with me. We had these conversations, you know. And my manager has been very understanding as well. And I was very honest. She was actually a coworker when I came to my new team, and she got promoted up. So she knows when I came in kind of what had happened and how I felt about things and kind of, you know, why I have reason to feel that way.
Mm-hmm. And
it's really nice to be in a place where you're allowed to have your feelings, even when your feelings are sometimes a little anti the company. So do I still show up and do an amazing job? Of course. Do I still love the actual, like, work itself most of the time? But I have some very spicy feelings about how things are handled by the upper people. And in fact, if you're listening to this, I did record a TikTok about my layoff experience, a short one, because I hopped on the other day and my For You page was just full of people, like, live recording their layoff. And then talking about it. Yeah, so when they get that 15-minute thing pop up, it's now like a known thing. This is how they do it.
Yeah, because they'll, like, schedule.
And they'll say, oh, suddenly people are getting 15-minute meetings today, and I'm one of them. I'm probably getting laid off. And they start recording when they jump in the meeting. And
what
then
an idea.
Yeah, then they post about it later. And so many people in the comments were just so surprised by the fact that they were getting laid off without knowing layoffs were coming.
Yeah.
They were getting laid off by people they didn't know in the company that they'd never spoken to or heard of.
That's weird.
That their managers didn't know they were getting laid off before they got laid off. And that's exactly what happened to me every single time.
That's crazy.
So it's how they do it. You know, they have people making decisions who don't know you, don't know who you are, don't know your metrics, don't know your reviews, don't care, don't look. It's all based on some computer that tells them who are the best people to ditch based on where you live and probably your salary grade a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So, come to find out, I actually had a job interview months back with this woman who used to be an HR contractor for the company I work at now. And when she saw that on my resume, she was like, ooh, we could talk about these layoffs and how sneaky they are and the things that they do. And I said, girl, I know, I've been through it 3 times. She's like, no. I said, yes.
And you're still there?
Yeah, that is the reaction I get every time. And I say, well, that's why, no offense to anyone of my coworkers who's listening to this, that's why I explore my options when I see anything come up.
Yeah.
If I see something that looks intriguing, I explore it because the company doesn't care about me. And it's become extremely obvious. Even to the person who has to be blatantly stabbed multiple times before they think, oh, this person might not have my best interest at heart.
They're not even stabbing you in the back. They stab you, like, full on in the front.
Full on
and you're
in the
just
front.
like, oh, I just don't know yet, though.
And you're like, well, maybe they still like me. That's me in a nutshell.
That's a great visual.
And you got to go where you're valued, and I'm not valued there, and it is what it is. The people who know me and know my work value me and want me to stay, but they don't get to make the decisions, and so here I am.
You would think you would be a cat person.
You would think. I don't like litter boxes.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I'm also not really a dog person. I have 2 dogs whom I love deeply, but they are tiny. They are not like your average dogs.
That's true.
They're like itty bitty. They're like little cats.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. I'm not into
you're a small animal person.
I am. If it's tiny and cute, I will love it forever.
That's right.
But yeah, I recorded a TikTok about it because it just really surprised me in the comments how many people were like, huh? What? And I'm like, is this not a known thing? Like, yeah, this has been my life.
Well, where I work, it's not as known. I will say there are some layoffs that have happened that I don't feel like were handled correctly, but I think you're going to get that everywhere, and some of it does come down to who's doing the managing.
Yeah.
But we have a coaching flow in place, and you're not, unless we're being forced to downsize, which fortunately we've escaped a lot of that in the past, you're going to have gone through this entire coaching flow and you know that it's coming.
Yeah.
Or you did something blatantly outrageous and you still know that it's coming.
Well, and see, that's the thing I don't appreciate about my current place is, for example, the second time I was laid off, I was on a small team. My manager was told that our team would not be part of the layoffs. So, like, she knew layoffs were going to happen, but she didn't know who it would be or when or how many people.
See, that's even worse.
And she was told it would not be anyone on your team because you're small, you're dedicated, blah, blah, blah. And they had just given her the permission to hire 2 new people. And she had. She did the interviews, she hired them. They had not started training yet.
Wow.
And they laid me off. And she had no idea they were going to do it. And she's like, why? Why wouldn't they just tell me to just hire one person? And then I could keep you.
Exactly.
Like the investment financially of a company into hiring and training somebody who's not ever been in the company before.
Yeah. Turnover costs are insane.
Yeah. So why would they make that decision? Sometimes it just makes absolute 0 sense.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there were multiple people on that same team who were on corrective action plans.
Yep.
I have never, ever had a complaint against me in any sort of way. I've always done, exceeds or above on all of my reviews. And yet people who were performing lower than me were being kept.
Yeah.
And new people were being paid to be brought on and trained.
I've seen that happen in past jobs.
What?
Mm-hmm. When we went through some of the layoffs in my previous job, I'd be like, why did these people stay though? Like this other person you got rid of does 3 times the work that this person does.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when that HR contractor explained to me the tactic of sometimes it being based on your location, it made a lot of sense to me because different locations pay people different salaries.
Yeah.
And we're a nationwide company. So there's people from everywhere. So if they have to pay someone in Missouri more than they have to pay someone in Georgia or Florida or wherever,
Yeah.
then that makes sense.
Yeah. You would think Missouri would be on the lower end though.
Yeah, we're not on the upper end, that's for sure. I have colleagues that work in like New York and Pennsylvania, and they definitely get paid more. And I think Florida gets paid more.
I feel like anything on either coast would.
Yeah.
From what I see from housing prices. Yeah.
It's not that they are doing better financially, probably. It's just that they
the
get
cost
more
of
from
living.
the company per year.
Yeah. That's like a lot of these salary differences are necessary because then you go look at their grocery store prices and their house prices and their I don't know, literally everything, clothes, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been fortunate enough, Hawaii. I've been fortunate enough to do some traveling, and it is like big sticker shock sometimes. Yeah. Because I used to think, oh, these people are being paid so much, why? And then you go out there and you're like, oh,
because they can't afford to buy a gallon of milk.
Yeah, exactly. They would be starving. The poverty line there is 100K, like stuff
crazy.
Like that.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but man, we got really off track.
It's all interrelated.
And that's true because, like, when you can't take your lunches and your PTO for yourself,
Yeah.
or you don't receive the maternity leave necessary to recover and do proper bonding with your child, you get burnt out faster.
You do. You definitely do. We're experiencing that on my team right now. We were shorthanded for several months and like covering for multiple positions, and we did it barely. We survived. They got the new people hired. They've been trained. Yay. They're just now starting to take over cases and things. And just as that happens, we're dropping like flies with sickness. Like, it's shameful how predictable it is. So the burnout is real, and it's crazy, and it's intense.
Yeah.
And especially for all you working mommies out there who have done the maternity leave thing, if you were fortunate enough to even have maternity leave.
True.
And returned to work and watched the aftermath of that. I feel so conflicted because maternity leave, of course, needs to be a thing, and it needs to be much longer and more extensive than it is. But I understand the company's position too, because that makes you short-handed for as long as that person is gone. You can't afford budget-wise to really replace them. And so people are just taking on the extra work for that long in most cases. So that's rough. That's hard. Like, what are you going to do? How do you get the work done without burning everybody else out?
Sure.
But also for someone who's been through birth, it's intense. It's hugely medical, and it has long, lingering medical things you're dealing with for months. Not to mention if you're, breastfeeding on top of that. And you do need to have time to bond with your kid. If you're in the mental health field at all, you know about things like reactive attachment disorder and how much of an impact that can have on a young child. And you've heard the horror stories of the daycares and the preschools where the kids are just left laying there screaming and not attended to properly, or, and I'm not saying every place is like that, of course. I know there are loving, wonderful daycare providers out there. But it's all a risk. And
yeah,
even when Ari was a year and a half when Dan and I separated, I was the strictest of the strict about every single night being the person who puts Ari to bed and the person who wakes her up. She was so young. And even I was trying to, prepare a house to be sold. I was trying to date. I was trying to have fun with my friends, fun that I had really written off for myself for a long time. I was trying to get out there and live my life. And I made sure that no matter what I was doing, I was home to put her to bed every single night. I think there was maybe one or two in that time period that I didn't put her to bed, and it was her dad that put her to bed. He would come over to our home, even though he was no longer living there. He would watch her there. He would put her to bed. Anyway, all that to say, it is important to be there and to be there consistently for your children, especially in their younger years. I can't imagine not being able to do that, like being in a place where you can't have that bonding time with your infant and that recovery time for yourself physically. And I think it's a shame that dads don't have the same rights too. While they shouldn't need as long for the physical recovery piece, because obviously they don't physically go through it, mom needs someone who can take care of the baby while she is physically recovering.
Right.
And, that's hard. And dads should get to bond with their babies too.
Right.
So I do think a lot of companies are getting better at that. Maternity leave is improving, and paternity leave exists in some companies. But it needs to be way better. And I mean, if we're being real, foreign countries do it amazing, and we just need to step it up.
That's right.
We need to step it up.
Very basic coverage, like average coverage from my experience, is you have to take 1 week unpaid, then you get to use it under FEMLA the Family Medical Leave Act. And then I was able to use short-term disability to get 60% of my pay.
Yes, that's what I did too.
That is not a disability. And pay me 100%.
1,000%.
Pay me 1,000%. 1,000%. Pay us 100%.
Yeah.
90% of the time it works every time.
That's right.
But and every time I quote that movie, I get the percentage wrong. I don't even know what the real percentage is. I think I usually say like 60% of the time it works every time, but
yeah, I don't even remember. It's been too long. I need to rewatch that.
I know, we should.
Classic.
Just for fun.
We should.
It's nice that there's a base level of protection there, provided that you even have that short-term disability insurance, because if you don't, then you're out of luck. And if you haven't been at your job long enough, or you're not full-time, you don't get FEMLA either. And then you just have to not ever get paid ever. But where I work now, so where I worked previously, you had the 1 week unpaid, and if you had enough PTO, you could choose to use your PTO.
Okay.
Again, we are using PTO for not time off.
Right.
And then you started your 60% pay for however many weeks. And I did have situations where, like, I had some complications after a C-section, and they extended it past the initial, like, 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it is. And there were other situations where I was 3 kids in, and it went really well, and I felt good enough, and I reached out to my job, and I was like, hey, especially since I was working from home at the time, can I just start working again? Because I'd like 100% of my paycheck again.
Yeah.
Should I have been able to enjoy those last 2 to 3 weeks off? Yes. Did I want 100% of my pay instead? Also, yes.
And when you have the beautiful situation where you work from home, you still get to, get some of the baby snuggles and some of that stuff. So if you're fortunate enough to have someone who can be coming to your home and helping you, that sort of thing, or the kind of job where you can have your baby in your arms while you're working. Like
maternity leave where I'm at now is better. Like, I looked at it and I was like, maybe I should have one more kid. But they do a good job of giving you a few weeks off. And then they also do give the dads some time. And the paternity leave, you don't have to take it all up front. You can scatter it throughout, I believe, the first year. So that way, if dad needs to stay home on a certain day with mom, he can. Or if he needs to save it for a couple months down the road when there's a 3-month appointment and mom has to be at work, he can do that too.
That's great.
So yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but I think I'm going to preface this with also, if you're a new mom, you get an extra 5 days of PTO expressly for allowing for you to go to the doctor. Exactly. I think if you are a parent who has had a child within the last couple of years, that should just be a yearly thing for you, where you get even like 2 extra days, whatever, just something to be like, hey, we recognize that you probably go to the doctor more often than the average person, and temporarily, here is some extra PTO. I know that is not a popular opinion if you are not a mom, but that is my opinion.
I don't disagree, because we aren't using those days for fun PTO things. It's not creating a healthy work-life balance. It's us in desperation using the only avenues we can find to make something work that has to work.
Right.
And like, what are you going to do? Not take your sick kid to the doctor?
Right.
Not stay home with them when they can't go to school because they have a slight fever? Like, there's so many things about that people I didn't even think about until Ari started school. Like, she can be feeling her best and have no symptoms, and if she gets a slight fever, she's not allowed to go for 24 hours.
Yep. And if she's at the school, this has happened with my kids, they will be at the school. For whatever reason, they end up in the nurse's office. The nurse will always take their temperature. And if there is a fever, you have to come pick the child up. And then you have to wait for 24 hours after the fever has disappeared to return the child, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing. Like, another issue I've had as a single parent, anytime she has to be picked up from school, it's me. I live 5 minutes from the school. It makes no sense for her father to drive 40 minutes to go pick her up in the middle of his work day, but that puts it all on me, and that's okay. Well, now I have to leave early, so that's PTO.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky to be in a position where they let you flex a little bit of time if you have to.
Same.
So I could take 30 minutes to go get her and then flex 30 minutes into the evening and probably be fine. But that's not everybody's situation. And it's a shame that there aren't better systems built in.
Yeah. It would be nice if there was just
that.
some kind of allowance where it was like outside of the, like you have your PTO and then maybe you have like a small grouping of separate sick days or something. And then it's like, okay, up until a point, we will allow for this. And then after that, you have to understand, well, we are a business and something has to happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't, even if you could budgetarily, when you are working a full-time job, you can't say, I only want to be paid for 36 hours this week. I'm just going to not use PTO, or I'm out of PTO and I had to go deal with kid things, and 36 is just what it's going to have to be. No. HR is coming for you. In the nicest way possible. I love our HR crew. But you have to be working full-time hours to be a full-time employee and get full-time benefits. Mm-hmm. And so unless it's like there are allowances for like random out of the blue things. But like if this was happening on a consistent enough basis, it would be like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Legally.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're just not in a place as a society anymore where you can operate on somebody being a stay-at-home parent in 99% of situations.
Yeah.
There are situations where people are doing it. They're barely scraping by, but they're doing what they have to do because daycare is so expensive that even if they worked, it would just break even or still not make enough to pay for the daycare.
Yeah.
So I totally get that situation. And of course, there are people who have really great careers that pay really well, and so maybe their spouse does get to stay home. That's cool. I'm not crapping on that whatsoever. I wish I could do it with my whole heart. It's just not the
norm.
Yeah, it's just not the norm in our society anymore. If you can work, you basically have to.
Yep.
That's most situations.
Anyway. I very often think that I will never be retiring. You know, like not just at the mom stage, but also at the old person stage.
So
We're screwed.
I've had that fear, and I will use this as a chance to plug. Join us for Financial February. We're going to go over a lot of things about finances and how it's never too late to get started saving for your retirement and your future, which I have recently been very into. So you're going to learn some things, and we're going to change that, sister.
I'm excited. I was actually... As you were messaging me about some of the stuff, I was going to... This is sad. It's sad by choosing, but Brandon was home that night. He was downstairs. I was up here. He's gaming. I'm watching TV. So we're, instead of talking in person, messaging each other on the computer, on the phone.
And I talk through Alexa a lot, so it happens, you know?
We actually, on that note, in my former job, we would all sit at our computers, and we were like within feet of each other, and we would type something, and then all of us would bust out laughing, and we were all females, and our boss was a male, and he would come out here and be like, will you guys just talk to each other? I think he was nervous about what we were laughing about. He's like, will you just talk out loud? Secret? Yeah. So I was messaging him about something else, and I had meant to pass on like some of the stuff you were telling me, and then I didn't get around to it. But I'm gonna have to bring that up to him, because a lot of the things that you were saying are things that he's been saying, I wish we would do it this way. I wish we would do it that way. And so I think he's going to feel very validated.
Yes. Brandon, you're a smart cookie, you know?
And then maybe we can talk too about like some of the systems that operate a little differently and why this one is better.
Yes.
But that's a nice little preview.
Join us in February for some good information.
Yes.
Especially if you're a woman looking to improve your financial situation. Not that there's not good nuggets here for men. A lot of these things will work for you too. But a lot of what I'm learning is being gathered from various female resources that have noticed a lack in the system of education for women and how to do these things. So it's very much feminism, female empowerment. Yeah. Booyah.
And I don't know, I think it's pretty more common among women to have side hustles, if you will. And it's because we feel like we have to, because we have to take care of everything. So if we can find that financial freedom, maybe we get to enjoy more of our time and not feel like we have to monetize every second of our life.
Yeah.
I definitely try to monetize every second of my life.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had that conversation with my co-parent the other day. We were talking about the parenting plan and you know what child support covers versus you know how we have to still on top of that split other things and how tight things are right now and how we wish it was different.
Yeah.
But it is hard, and it is hard for each person, and we have to kind of walk that fine line of trying not to crush and strap each other financially, but also being fair about the financial responsibility it takes to raise a child. And it's difficult.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine if I had to like piecemeal everything out with Brandon to make sure that we were both contributing fairly.
It's not fun. And I mean, if you know me at all as a person, if you get some sort of message from me that has anything to do with money, you know, it took every grain of my soul to even form and reform probably 20 times before I send you a little text message that just says, hey, don't forget about this. And it took every fiber of my being. And we're in a situation right now where Ari is getting dental work done. And it requires so many visits, and they know ahead of time what it's going to be. And in every other situation, in order to avoid having to talk about it, I have just taken care of things, even though our parenting plan says you're supposed to split medical bills. But he's, you know, a good father to her. He spends quality time with her. He is never behind on child support. You know, he very reliable in these ways and very flexible. We work very well together on our schedule, having to change it suddenly. He doesn't make me drive out in the nasty weather, you know, just to have his time with her, that kind of stuff. We work very well together. And so it's hard for me to come into these situations where I even have to send the message that says, we had this appointment today, and this was the cost, and this is your responsibility. Like, it's really hard. And, you know, I, of course, have already, as we've talked about today, done the mental load, found the doctor, made the appointment, taken her to the appointment, taken the time off, lost my PTO for it, put it on my credit card, all of these things, you know, and then we have to, as co-parents, we have to add this extra task where we have to communicate about this cost and splitting it. And it just sucks. It's gross. It feels icky. It's not fun. So, kudos to all the parents out there doing these things, and kudos to the co-parents who don't have as great a co-parenting relationship and still have to have these conversations and still have to push these buttons. And I feel for you. It feels horrible to me all of the time, and I don't have a person who's going to respond to me with meanness or cruelty. You know, maybe not always in agreement, and maybe having other opinions on things, but never, it's not like he calls me names and verbally or emotionally abuses me all the time. You know, that's not our situation, thankfully. And even when we discussed the details of this as it came up, and I sent the message I didn't want to have to send, and we kind of went back and forth on how to handle it and stuff. Even in those messages, the conversation came up. You know, this is how I'm feeling about it, but I know we have a great thing going, and I don't want to upset the apple cart. I don't want to make it bad or have nasty feelings or someone to feel like it's unfair, but here's how I'm feeling about it, you know, and that's difficult. But we can at least have those conversations. So I do recognize the privilege in that of my situation. So it's an interesting line to walk.
Yeah, I will say I'm very surprised at the, like, in regards to being able to communicate in your co-parenting situation. There are many people I talk to on a daily basis that, because we have to ask, are you married, unmarried, or separated? Some states have rules where if you are married, we have to treat the file a certain way. If you're separated, we don't. And then you have states like Texas that don't care. You can be legally separated all you want, and they're still going to be like, nope, sorry. Texas is very difficult. So if you live in Texas, I'm sorry.
If you're a woman, don't move to Texas.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a list of states not to move to. But all of that to say...
Is Florida one of them?
No.
Don't crush my dreams.
Florida is not one of them. I will talk to people I do have a funny Florida story, though. Anyway, I will talk to people who have been like, well, I'm legally separated and we have been for about 19 years. Or, well, we're still technically married and it's in a state where it matters and they would have to get certain information from their spouse. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this many years in, why didn't you just...
I'll tell you why. Because the legal system is BS. Getting a divorce, Dan and I went into it completely amicable as far as not having an argument on what we wanted or deserved or got to keep or didn't, what we owned and who gets to keep what. We had no arguments there whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have a very difficult parenting agreement to set up because she was so young. We both agreed that she needs to be with me most of the time. Mm-hmm. She was still breastfeeding. So, it was the cleanest version of a divorce I can imagine. It was so equitable that I hired a lawyer so we would have someone to do the paperwork who represented me, but he didn't even hire a lawyer because we were just in complete agreement on everything. Mm-hmm. We just wanted someone who would fill out and file the paperwork for us so that we didn't have to refile with all of our errors or whatever.
Right, like get through all the...
Yeah, and even that took like 2 years.
Yeah. Divorce takes a while.
Crazy. And I was dating somebody at the time who was going through a divorce and had been for many, many years. The back and forth, the thousands of dollars.
And then you have to be careful. You're trying to move on with your life, and you have to be careful how you do it because you're still technically in your proceeding.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
You got to be very upfront on those dating apps.
But when you don't take care of it, it comes back to bite you.
It does.
These people can't buy a house without talking to their significant other unless... I will say conventional does not care what you do. Like, you can be whoever you want and do whatever you want with that house. They don't care.
Yeah.
But your file has to look much better. But when it comes to VA and FHA, because a lot of their requirements are, like, they're government backed, a lot of their requirements are making sure that you're buying a home for yourself and not to flip it, things like that. That's when you run into all of those issues.
Yeah.
So
I think I had to get Dan to sign and have notarized one piece of paper that we put into our divorce paperwork when I bought my condo that basically said it was him signing away that he had any sort of rights or claim to it. And we had him sign that before the purchase went through.
Yeah. Because you were still in the middle of things, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were still, I think I was in the condo for about 1.5 years before our divorce was final. Mm-hmm.
That might have been more for his protection in that situation too, because say he had gone and decided to buy a house for himself during that time, we would have, just from my end of things, we would have had to prove that he wasn't responsible for the payment that you were making.
Yeah, they told me that it had to do with that for him, and with me, it protected it as an asset that he couldn't come after in the divorce.
So I didn't think about that.
He couldn't turn around because the divorce wasn't finalized and say, well, now this is a joint asset and you owe me half of it.
Yeah.
So even though, the money was already clean by then, we had already, split and divided and sold the house.
And obviously he's not going to do that. But...
Yeah. He wouldn't have come after me for that. But also had to get his okay to move that far away.
I wondered about that.
So
yeah,
I don't think we had to file anything in particular. But basically my lawyer said he can stop you from moving within a certain distance.
Right.
I think I was within the parameters, even though it's only 40 minutes. But he's like, you can't cross state lines. You can't, go within this many miles or whatever. Mm-hmm. But
so once Ari's in college, you can move to Florida.
Exactly. When she turns the strike of 18, we'll be in Disney.
The carriage will become a pumpkin,
and we just won't come home. No, I've looked at transferring my counseling license to Florida, and it's a pain in the tush right now. Is it? Yeah, I'd have to go back to school and take more courses and take a whole second national exam. There are 2 national exams, and of course, they're on the other one.
When
have a sponsor. So.
When I want to get licensed in a new state, all I have to do is listen to a couple hours worth of, we call them OILs, online instructional learning, I think. And then, bam, I'm licensed.
Now they are the counselors, the LPCs, which is what my license is, have come together and they've been passing laws in every state to come to a national agreement where we can see people in the other states if we're all part of the consortium together. But it's still very much in the beginning stages. Like almost all of the states, I think by now have agreed. There are like a handful that are still holding out and not coming to the agreement. And then they have to come up with what does that actually look like? Like how do we really logistically do this? So hopefully it's in the works. But as far as like COVID coming and telehealth becoming a more increasingly used thing, it would be very beneficial for counselors in all areas to be able to see anyone, anywhere.
Sure.
And we all get the same training. It's ridiculous. And we all pass one of the same 2 tests that have all the same information on it.
Right.
So if you've passed the NCE, the National Counselor's Exam, or whatever the other one is that I can't remember the name of right now, you should legit be considered okay to therapize somebody. Yeah. So I don't get what the holdup has been.
Like, are lawyers required to get certified in every state?
I don't know. I don't know if they are. I think different professions are, and some are and some aren't. So I think it's silly.
Maybe I should I have a friend on Facebook who's, I think, an estate lawyer. Laura, I'm going to make you listen to this and tell me. Her husband's a lawyer too, but
yeah, it'd be great if we could just, for rural areas to have less counselors available, for places that are like oversaturated and need a bunch of like, there's a ton of people and there's not enough counselors, or there's too many counselors here and not enough over there.
Right.
We could even it out. You know, it would be so simple.
Exactly.
And then,
they could have you like pass a little test in each state if you wanted to.
Yeah, they could. I mean, I think they should just go with the national exam we've already passed. But,
that's the thing. Like, we are in a national database. And they've had that rule ever since the housing market crash in like 2008, I think it was. Entire industry changed. Yeah. And yes, you still have to get licensed state by state, and different states will have different rules around certain things. But you are in a national database. We've all passed a test that every single mortgage lender originator has to pass. But it's still like, well, we can't just go ahead and like help every person out. Like, we still have to go state to state, and
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, different ethical rules and different laws about consent and age and all these kinds of things. But we have vast technological resources. Like, we could figure that out. We could have a database where a therapist can log in and say, I'm seeing a client. I live here. They live there. What do I need to know? Here's the bullet points.
We can rebuild it.
We could do it. We could do it.
Yep.
If only women ran the world.
Right? We're going to go change all the systems. Fight Club Part 2. Bring down the student loan companies. I mean, if you work for a student loan company, you didn't hear that.
Coming for you, Mohila.
That would be a great tagline. Coming for you, Mohila. Oh my gosh. Well, I think we've had a lot of fun today.
Yeah. We may have gone off on some rabbit trails, but that's what happens when you drink a glass of wine and chat about things with your BFF.
And that's what makes this whole thing so fun.
It is. It is. You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly. It's roulette every time. We've got February all planned out. We've got March all planned out. That info will be coming soon. I think while February is going to be a popular topic, March is going to make us go viral. So we'll see. But as always, be sure to check out our website at workingmomswine.com. Check us out on TikTok, Instagram. I need to be better about posting on Instagram. Yeah, YouTube, Spotify. And I've been plugging this book club we're trying to start up. We need people to join the book club, so we have enough people to have a book club. So go to patreon.com/workingmomswine, select the book club option. We will send you a physical copy of the book. You'll get access to a community. You'll get access to our monthly discussion of the book. and it's going to be just as engaging and entertaining as the podcasts are.
It is. We're going to read some fun books.
Yes, it's going to be great. So we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.